Minutes before departure, something extraordinary happened aboard Delta Flight 2877 at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Havoc, a German Shepherd trained to the highest federal K9 standards, broke protocol, ignoring his handler's sharp command. Havoc charged into the aircraft's cockpit, his muscular frame moving with urgency not seen in a routine security sweep. He didn't hesitate. He didn't check for approval. He reacted. And what he found behind a concealed maintenance panel would stop a veteran air marshal in his tracks and leave a seasoned airline captain speechless. Within that tight space, hidden in a compartment most professionals would never consider dangerous, was a secret that, had it gone unnoticed, would have turned the aircraft into a flying tomb. Before we take you through the events that led to this life-saving discovery, take a moment. Think about the routines we trust every day, the checklists, the systems, the procedures, the technology. Now ask yourself, what if the only reason you're still alive today is because a dog trusted his nose over human assumptions? This is not a story about a heroic animal. Or not just that. It is a story about instincts, about the kind of wordless understanding built between a handler and his K9 partner over years of shared danger. About the power of noticing what doesn't fit, of refusing to ignore that one subtle detail everyone else missed. It is a story about a witness, a woman whose memory held the key to dismantling one of the most violent and well-funded criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. A woman who became the target of an operation so sophisticated, so meticulously hidden within the framework of everyday systems, that it took a creature beyond human logic to detect it. In the next few minutes, you'll follow Special Agent Damien, Reeves and Havoc from the quiet early hours of a Monday morning, to a race against time that spanned states, agencies, and disciplines. You'll meet Dr. Isabella Vega, a cartel accountant turned federal witness, and the layered security teams who tried to get her to testify before the cartel could silence her forever. You'll discover how an operative from Mexico contorted himself into a space not meant for humans, bringing with him a polymer pistol and a mission. How another cell planted a disguised explosive inside an airplane's hydraulic control panel. How a cleaning cart at a federal courthouse held a device powerful enough to shatter the building's foundations, and how every single one of these threats slipped past human checks. But not past Havoc, because this isn't just a story about crime. It's about how we protect what matters most. It's about trust, and how sometimes the best decision you can make is to stop everything, listen to the one who doesn't speak, and trust the dog. Stay with us, because what began as a standard witness transport operation is about to unfold into a high-stakes odyssey through betrayal, technology, instinct, and redemption. And by the time this story ends, you may never look at an airport K9 team the same way again. Special Agent Damien Reeves had always known that quiet mornings at major airports were deceptive. The stillness of Terminal D at Dallas-Fort Worth International was not peace. It was potential. Potential for movement, for chaos, for history, to pivot on the decisions made in narrow corridors and laminated security zones. Today, that potential was palpable. He adjusted his tactical vest, fingers moving with practiced economy. At his side, Havoc matched his pace with flawless heel alignment. The German Shepherd's amber eyes were alert, his ears tuning into frequencies no human could detect. "You feel it too, huh?" Reeves murmured. Havoc's response wasn't vocal, it never was. A slight twitch of his ears, a micro-shift in his posture. That was enough. Reeves had learned to read those signals with the precision of a surgeon. After 5 years together across dozens of missions and 3 continents, their communication had become something beyond language. Reeves himself was no stranger to intensity. A decade with special forces had refined his instincts and carved discipline into his bones. Now, in the Federal Air Marshal K9 Division, he dealt with a different kind of battlefield, one where threats wore civilian clothing and carried forged identities, and where a single overlooked detail could spell disaster. Today, he wasn't hunting threats. He was protecting a woman, Special Agent Reeves, said a voice behind him. Catherine Donovan, Supervisory Air Marshal, approached holding a digital tablet. Her expression was sharp, but her eyes carried the weariness of someone who'd seen too much. Commander Ellis is assembling his team at Checkpoint C. He wants your final assessment. Reeves nodded. Routes secure. We did a final sweep 10 minutes ago. Nothing unusual. As they walked together, the weight of what was coming settled. Like gravity, Checkpoint C was cordoned off from public access. Inside, Commander Gabriel Ellis stood surrounded by agents dressed in what the public would mistake for business attire. Each suit concealed ballistic armor and tactical hardware. Ellis himself radiated command presence, a man who had built his reputation through 17 years of high-risk transports without a single operational failure. He turned and extended his hand. Reeves, glad you and Havoc could join us. We'll need both of you at your sharpest today. Always, Reeves replied. Havoc sat beside him, posture straight, eyes locked on the room's movements. Ellis glanced toward a glass-walled secure room where a woman in her mid-30s sat at a table. She looked composed, hair pulled back, posture precise, reviewing documents with an assistant U.S. attorney. She could have been mistaken for a corporate analyst. But she wasn't. Dr. Isabella Vega, Ellis said quietly. The Romero cartel's lead financial architect, 8 years managing their entire money laundering operation. Reeves watched her closely. What changed? Her brother, Ellis replied. He questioned the cartel's move into human trafficking. He was executed for it. Vega compiled records after that, meticulously. Names, accounts, wire trails. They can't afford to let her speak, and they won't stop trying. 2 previous witnesses are dead. She's our last link to bring the RICO case forward. A pause, then Ellis tapped the tablet. Delta 2877 departs at 0730. You and Havoc will be in the forward cabin. She'll be in first class, flanked by marshals. We board first. If we miss our window, weather out east could ground us. We either get her to New York by noon, or this entire operation collapses. As they moved toward the gate, the aircraft waited under pre-dawn haze. But beneath its smooth surface, unknown to everyone but one K-9, a plan was already in motion. A threat was hiding in plain sight. And the clock had started. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner sat on the tarmac like a dormant creature, silent, unassuming. The early morning light reflected off its sleek fuselage as if nothing unusual was about to unfold within its cabin. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at the cockpit entrance, scanning a digital checklist. Her face, framed by silver-streaked hair, carried the calm authority of someone with over 18,000 flight hours. When Reeves and Havoc approached, she offered a polite but tight nod. Special Agent Reeves, Federal Air Marshal Service, he said, presenting his badge. Mitchell gave a practiced smile. We're under tight weather constraints today, Agent. JFK is showing deteriorating conditions. We'll need to push back on time. Understood, Reeves replied. This will be quick, but thorough. He and Havoc began their sweep from the rear galley. Forward, checking compartments, lavatories, and underseats. Havoc moved with precision, tail low, ears rotating like radar dishes, his nose leading him through layers of human scent and synthetic material. Reeves noted how calm the aircraft felt. Too calm, perhaps. The kind of calm that felt composed rather than natural. As they approached the cockpit bulkhead, Havoc slowed. His breathing changed, slightly shallower, more calculated. Reeves caught it immediately. What is it, boy? Havoc didn't break stride but veered subtly toward the cockpits, side panels. He sniffed along the edges, lingering for an extra beat. Not a formal alert, but interest. Reeves filed it mentally. They continued into the cockpit where First Officer Michael Chen was adjusting flight computers. He stepped out with quiet efficiency, giving Reeves and Havoc the space they needed. Once alone, Havoc returned to the rear wall of the flight deck. His nose traced the seams of a maintenance access panel. He didn't alert, but he didn't look away either. Reeves knelt and ran his fingers along the panel's edge. Nothing jumped out. No broken seals, no exposed screws. But Havoc's posture, leaning forward, eyes locked, breathing shallow, spoke volumes. Mitchell re-entered. "All clear?" "For now," Reeves said. "We'll do another pass after boarding." "We won't have time for that," Mitchell countered, glancing at her radar. "The storm is moving faster than predicted. JFK's reducing capacity. We need to depart within 45 minutes or risk diversion." "Noted," Reeves said, though his eyes remained on Havoc. The dog sat near the cockpit door, still staring at the panel. Minutes later, Dr. Vega was escorted onto the aircraft, accompanied by Air Marshal Travers and 2 additional agents in plain clothes. Up close, she looked different, smaller than expected, fatigued but composed. Her gaze flicked to every corner of the cabin with quiet calculation. Reeves stood near the front. Havoc was beside him, seated but not relaxed. "We'll begin, General." "Boarding in 15, a flight attendant announced. "Captain Mitchell has requested expedited procedures." Reeves turned to Ellis. "I need to check the cockpit again." Havoc's showing consistent interest. Ellis checked his watch. "Make it quick." Inside the cockpit, Mitchell looked irritated. "Agent Reeves, we're finalizing departure clearance. We can't afford delays." "I understand, Captain. But my K-9 partner is indicating ongoing concern with this area. I need to be thorough." Mitchell stood her ground. "I've flown commercial aircraft for 21 years. This plane passed all inspections. Excessive security can create its own risks." "I appreciate that. But he's not just a bomb dog. He's trained. For anomalies, behavioral scent patterns. Something here isn't right." Reeves turned back to the panel. From an outside perspective, it looked normal. But to him, and more importantly to Havoc, something was off. 5 minutes, Mitchell relented, crossing her arms. Havoc didn't move. He sat at attention, eyes fixed, silent, focused. Reeves had seen that look before. It never meant nothing. The scent of suspicion was thick now, and time was running out. The clock on the cockpit wall showed 07:01. General boarding was moments away. Outside, the sky above Dallas-Fort Worth was beginning to thicken with the promise of turbulence. Inside, something far more dangerous was already present. And only one member of the security team seemed to understand. Havoc remained still, his entire body language locked on the maintenance access panel behind the captain's chair. Not an alert, not a bark, but an insistence. A silence that was louder than noise. "Captain Mitchell," Reeves said, carefully lowering his voice, "I believe we need to open this panel now." Mitchell's jaw tightened. She reached for the cockpit phone. "You're asking me to delay departure because your dog is looking at a wall? I'm asking you to trust my partner's instincts. And mine." She made the call anyway. Maintenance control was contacted. A technician was dispatched. In the brief silence that followed, Mitchell looked at Reeves with something between frustration and fear. "You have 5 minutes," she repeated. "Then we're boarding. Period." The technician arrived, tools in hand, and introduced himself as Ramirez. After a brief rundown of the issue, he knelt to inspect the panel. "Torque feels light," Ramirez noted, twisting one of the fasteners. "These should be tighter after pressurization. Someone's opened this recently." Reeves glanced at Havoc. "He won't." Dog hadn't moved. With deliberate care, Ramirez removed the panel. Behind it was a cavity filled with standard avionics, bundles of wires, small control modules, labeled boxes. It all looked normal. "Except, hold on," Reeves said, shining his flashlight deeper. "A thin seam, a slight discoloration in the anti-corrosion coating, an irregularity." "This panel doesn't match," he murmured. Mitchell crossed her arms. "That could be a standard repair, except it's not in the records, and there's no service notation for replacement." Havoc let out a low whine. It was soft but unmistakable. Reeves recognized that sound from training scenarios, used when the dog knew something was there but couldn't reach it. "Step back," Reeves ordered. Then he looked at Havoc. "Find it. The German Shepherd surged forward, nose deep into the cavity. He pressed against the interior wall with sudden force. There was a pop, a subtle shift as a hidden panel gave way. The false wall fell open. Inside was a man, cramped, motionless at first, then struggling. A wiry frame folded into a space no adult should fit in. A face pale from compression. A right shoulder grotesquely dislocated. Reeves drew his weapon. Federal agent, don't move. Ellis burst into the cockpit behind him, pistol already raised. Hands where I can see them. The man moved his arm. Toward his waist, Havoc launched. His jaws locked around the arm mid-motion. The suspect screamed. A compact pistol slipped free and clattered to the floor. Reeves secured the weapon while keeping his gun trained. Good hold, Havoc. Maintain. Mitchell stood frozen. Color drained from her face. Who the hell is this? Commander Ellis stepped forward, looking at the suspect's face. Recognition dawned. Rafael Mendoza, Romero associate, suspected infiltration specialist. Last seen in Monterey. Airport security rushed in. The cockpit was secured. Havoc released on command and returned to Reeves's side, still alert. The hidden compartment, professionally altered, lined with thermal shielding and soundproofing, had concealed not only a man, but a mission, one that would have gone undetected by every scanner, protocol, and checklist. Except for a dog. As Mendoza was restrained and escorted out, Mitchell approached Reeves. Her voice was hushed. I owe you an apology. No, Reeves replied. You owe it to him. He nodded at Havoc, who simply stared back at the now empty cavity. The danger was over, but the mission had just begun. Chapter 4. The Stowaway. The man they'd pulled from behind the cockpit panel was no ordinary intruder. Even restrained, shoulder dislocated, face contorted in pain, he radiated discipline. Not the chaos of a desperate saboteur, but the calculated stillness of someone trained to endure. Reeves knew that look. He'd seen it in Special Forces interrogations and deep cover fieldwork. This man was more than a cartel enforcer. He was a specialist. Mendoza. Commander Ellis confirmed his identity through facial recognition moments. Through the arrest, Rafael Mendoza, ex-Mexican naval infantry, known for his ability to access restricted vessel compartments, disappeared 5 years earlier after a stint with private security, then resurfaced linked to the Romero organization's most secretive operations. He was the ghost in their intelligence files. Now they had him, and they had questions. As medical personnel arrived to stabilize Mendoza's injuries, Reeves remained near Havoc, who stood unflinching beside the disassembled cockpit. Captain Mitchell hovered nearby, pale and silent, absorbing the enormity of what nearly happened on her aircraft. How did he even get in there? She finally asked. Reeves ran his flashlight deeper into the cavity. What he saw was chilling. Customized paneling, rewired bundles, and thin acoustic insulation layered beneath normal thermal shielding. This wasn't improvised, he said. It was engineered. Special Agent Vasquez arrived with a portable evidence capture kit and began photographing the interior. She examined the concealed airflow system, a mini duct tapping into the environmental controls. He could have stayed hidden for hours without hypoxia. And those soundproof layers? Once airborne, even turbulence wouldn't have exposed him. Reeves studied the surrounding structure. He wasn't just here to listen. He had access to flight systems. This placement, right behind the avionics junctions, he could have tampered mid-flight. Ellis nodded grimly. Not sabotage, assassination. The plan was slowly revealing itself. At 38,000 feet, Mendoza would have emerged when the cockpit was least guarded, perhaps during meal service or a crew rotation. He could have neutralized the pilots, accessed the avionics, and either disabled the aircraft or completed a close-range execution of Dr. Vega. He had a weapon, polymer frame to avoid magnetic detection, and a ceramic blade hidden in his boot. It was the kind of kill that would leave no trace, no electronic signature, just a catastrophic failure at altitude. A tragedy blamed on weather, human error, or mechanical fault. The team debriefed in a secure terminal office as technicians dismantled the modified panel for forensic analysis. This level of modification, Vasquez said, holding up her tablet with structural diagrams, is consistent with intelligence-based infiltration tactics. It takes time, resources, blueprints, and someone on the inside, Reeves added. That landed hard. Everyone in the room understood what it meant. The Romero cartel had breached not just airport security, but the federal protection protocols themselves. Mitchell shook her head. I check that panel every flight. I've run pre-flight on hundreds of aircraft. I never would have known. Reeves looked to Havoc, who was now lying on his mat, chewing on a special-duty rubber ring, his reward for a confirmed alert. You weren't supposed to know, Reeves said, but he did. Hours later, in a conference room converted into a mobile operations center, Mendoza finally spoke. Under guarded supervision and mild sedation for his shoulder, he confirmed what they feared. He had been inside the aircraft since the previous night, during a scheduled maintenance window. He'd used forged credentials, passed biometric scans, with synthetic prints, and replaced an avionics panel with one of his own design. Once inside, he sealed himself in and waited. How did he know Dr. Vega would be on that flight? Ellis asked. Mendoza remained silent, but the implication was clear. Someone with high-level access had leaked classified travel details, and Mendoza wasn't working alone. The air had shifted again. From relief to realization, they hadn't just stopped, a lone attacker. They'd intercepted phase 1 of a much larger operation, and somewhere beyond the reach of the airport perimeter, someone was already adjusting the plan, because Vega was still alive, and the cartel didn't tolerate failure. Not, twice. The Dallas runway stretched out ahead, but the aircraft meant to carry Dr. Isabella Vega to safety would never leave the ground. The presence of an assassin within its cockpit walls, discovered just minutes before takeoff, had altered everything. Not only was the flight scrubbed, but the entire protective details strategy was now obsolete. Within 30 minutes, a new plan was underway. The Department of Justice rerouted the witness transport operation. Dr. Vega would now be flown under sealed manifest aboard a nondescript cargo-configured jet, departing from a private airfield outside of Fort Worth. Her route would change mid-air. Final destination. Classified. Commander Ellis ordered a split-team operation. Half the agents would remain behind to oversee forensic retrieval from the compromised aircraft. The other half, including Reeves and Havoc, would accompany Dr. Vega to the new extraction point. They moved fast. 2 unmarked SUVs rolled onto the tarmac under cover of twilight. Havoc rode in the second vehicle, seated upright beside Reeves, whose eyes scanned the surroundings with seasoned precision. Vega sat silently in the front vehicle, her face turned away from the window. Reeves kept his hand on Havoc's harness. The German Shepherd was calm but alert, nostrils flaring at the scents filtering in from the partially lowered window. His quiet vigilance was grounding. The convoy exited the airfield perimeter and merged onto a rural service road. Ellis's voice crackled through Reeves's secure earpiece. New intel. Our leak might have touched more than flight data. We're hearing chatter suggesting the Romero network anticipated reroute contingencies. Reeves glanced at Havoc. They're already adapting. Ellis didn't respond. What had begun as a tactical extraction now felt like a running chess match. Every move countered. Every adaptation observed. 2 hours later, they touched down in Nashville. The aircraft, a retrofitted Cessna Citation, landed, without incident, at a restricted maintenance hangar outside the main airport complex. Vega was transferred directly into a fortified airport vehicle and driven to an underground secure facility used for air marshal training and coordination. Havoc led the way. Even here, in what should have been a neutral space, he was working. Nose down, tail steady, processing scent layers like a mathematician solving an invisible equation. Still clean, Reeves reported, following the dog's silent sweep. Inside the facility's command center, Agent Vasquez pulled Reeves aside. We've intercepted 2 encrypted communications routed through cartel proxies in Guatemala. One mentions secondary channel disruption. That could mean Nashville. Or something worse, Reeves replied. They're not improvising. They're executing redundancies. Vega, meanwhile, sat with a federal medic. Her pulse was high, but her focus remained sharp. When Reeves approached to give an update, she looked up. "You saved my life this morning." "No, ma'am," Reeves said. "He did." He gestured toward Havoc, now drinking water from a portable, collapsible bowl. Vega's expression softened. "That's not just a dog. That's certainty with fur." Reeves almost smiled. Then came the knock. A uniformed facility coordinator entered, holding a tablet. "You'll want to see this." Aerial reconnaissance had picked up an unregistered vehicle parked within 300 yards of the airfield's northern perimeter. Thermal imaging showed 2 occupants, neither of whom appeared to move for over 40 minutes. The vehicle matched none of the authorized contractor or employee logs. Ellis ordered a silent lockdown. Reeves and Havoc were dispatched with a tactical team to intercept. They approached from the south under cover of darkness, using a maintenance access tunnel that surfaced near the tree line. The moment they emerged, Havoc's demeanor changed. His muscles tightened. His ears locked forward, scent. He didn't bark. He simply moved. The team fanned out. Havoc pulled toward the vehicle like a magnet. Reeves followed, weapon drawn. As they reached the final stretch of grass, the car's engine roared. Someone had spotted them, but not before Havoc lunged. He reached the rear wheel just as it spun in gravel, leaping and locking onto the fender with enough force to jolt the entire chassis sideways. Reeves arrived an instant later, yanking the driver's door open. Inside were 2 men, both armed, both stunned. The passenger raised a weapon. Reeves fired first, 1 shot. The man slumped. The driver raised both hands. "Don't shoot, you were just 300 yards from a federal airfield watching us with binoculars and encrypted radio gear." The man went silent. Agents flooded in behind Reeves. The suspects were secured, their vehicle impounded. Inside, long-range optics, frequency scanners, and a tablet containing schematics of the Nashville facility. Ellis reviewed the items in silence. "They weren't the attack," he said finally. "They were reconnaissance." Vega's safe arrival in Nashville had not gone unnoticed, and now even their backup plans were exposed. Reeves knelt beside Havoc, who was panting but otherwise unfazed. "You found them before the tech did," he murmured. The dog licked his hand in response. That night no one slept because the next strike wasn't a matter of if, only when. Chapter 6. The Hangar. The morning haze over Nashville hadn't yet lifted when the tactical convoy rolled toward the secured maintenance zone. The perimeter fencing had been tripled in height overnight. Surveillance drones buzzed the perimeter, and every mechanic who entered was pre-screened by FBI biometric teams. But for Reeves, all eyes were on Havoc. The German Shepherd moved with intent, scanning the environment with every sensory tool he possessed. Not just eyes and ears, but a nose that could read the air like scripture. Today they weren't patrolling, they were hunting. Dr. Vega had been relocated to a subterranean safe room inside a fortified federal facility. Her continued testimony depended on eliminating all remaining threats. And according to intercepted chatter, the hangar might be one. The maintenance supervisor, a wiry man named Tom Wexler, met them at the entry gate. Nervous but cooperative. "We ran checks on all components last night. Everything passed. Twice. Your scans can't smell what he can," Reeves replied. Inside the massive hangar bay stood 3 aircraft. The first was an Airbus undergoing avionics upgrade. The second, a smaller commuter jet with a hydraulic calibration in progress. The third was a wide-body A330 with its forward landing gear disassembled. That's where Havoc lingered. "Interest. Pattern," Reeves murmured. "Not alert yet." Wexler frowned. "That bird was pulled in yesterday for routine steering calibration. We had 2 specialists come in for the job. Outside contractors, but cleared. Show me the names." Wexler pulled up the roster. One technician, Alan Choi, matched known employee records. The other, Luis Rivera, flagged as a newly cleared contractor, credentialed just 3 weeks ago. Reeves's brow furrowed. Run. Rivera through DHS identity audits, now. As Wexler handed off the task to an assistant, Havoc's attention snapped back to the landing gear. He circled the strut once, paused, then sat down with crisp precision. Formal alert. Reeves approached slowly. The compartment was lined with actuators, control rods, and hydraulic accumulators, but one component stood out, a pressure gauge, too. New wrong make? Request EOD support, Reeves called into his comms. Potential embedded device. FBI bomb technicians arrived within 10 minutes carrying non-invasive scanners. They examined the suspicious component, then exchanged looks. Not standard issue. Casing is aftermarket. There's an internal cavity. What's inside? A portable X-ray revealed the truth. A circuit board, a pressure switch, and what appeared to be a stabilized explosive compound. Enough to rupture the nose gear hydraulic system mid-flight. Enough to bring down a plane. Trigger could be time-based or pressure-activated, said the lead technician. Or remote. The team cleared the hangar. Specialized bomb disposal robots moved in. Havoc was relocated to a blast-safe distance but refused to sit. He paced, watching the scene like a soldier separated from his squad. As the robot removed the component, FBI forensic analysts compared its construction to another device discovered months earlier in Texas, linked to Romero operations. Same architecture, Vasquez confirmed. Same designer. Who's Rivera? Reeves asked. Moments later, DHS returned the audit. Luis. Rivera was a fabrication. The man on the credential photo was real, but the biometric markers didn't match. Fingerprints had been synthesized. Iris data spoofed. Alias of Juan Delgado, Ellis said over the radio. Former Mexican military, technical ordnance specialist, suspected ties to Romero's paramilitary wing. Where is he now? Left. Nashville yesterday on a private charter. Destination, Monterey. Another ghost gone before the storm hit. The A330 was declared a crime scene. Every inch of it would be scanned, dismantled, and rebuilt. Vega's transport plans were again revised. No more planes, no known routes. The team would move her via a chain of decoy convoys, rerouting through secure drop points across 3 states. In the debriefing room, Ellis summarized it simply. They're not just trying to stop her. They're deploying layered contingencies. To do it, Reeves, seated beside Havoc, reviewed the scan images of the device. Military grade, concealed within common components. Built for one purpose. Desperate men don't build like this, he said quietly. They build fast, loud, sloppy. He looked at Ellis. This was designed by someone who expected to succeed. The room went silent. The war wasn't just on the ground anymore. It was in the air, on the routes, in the details. And the only warning they got, a dog who refused to ignore what others couldn't see. Again. The discovery in the hangar changed everything. It was no longer a matter of a single attack, but the uncovering of a strategic, layered threat system, each piece set to activate if the previous one failed. Within hours, the FBI's multi-agency command structure shifted into a state of heightened alert. Air travel was now off the table. Ground transport convoys, even the decoy ones, were considered vulnerable. The new plan was radical. Break the chain entirely. Instead of transporting Dr. Vega through conventional means, the team would disperse. Her security detail across 3 states, while she herself remained stationary, in a sealed subterranean chamber within a military training complex outside Knoxville, Tennessee. Only 3 people knew her exact location. Commander Ellis, Specialty, Agent Vasquez, and a retired Navy communications officer tasked with off-grid secure transmissions. To the outside world, Dr. Vega had disappeared, but her testimony hadn't. It continued remotely, piped via encrypted audio into a courtroom in New York. The grand jury heard her voice, her documents, her evidence, but never saw her face, and the Romero cartel panicked. Intercepted communications revealed immediate disarray in their command structure. Their fail-safes had failed. The stowaway in Dallas, the bomb in Nashville, they were all part of a single, operational map designed to collapse if even one piece was neutralized. But they hadn't planned for Havoc. In the days following the hangar discovery, Reeves and Havoc were redeployed not as bodyguards but as hunters. Their new mission: sweep every transit hub, every logistics node, and every contractor facility associated with Romero infiltration tactics. And they started in Memphis, a freight terminal where thousands of cargo packages passed through nightly, anonymous, uninspected, ideal for sabotage. Havoc's first alert came beneath a conveyor belt in Zone C, a metal toolbox left without manifest. Inside, another pressure device. Then, 3 days later, at a rail junction in Chattanooga, a service tunnel embedded with suspicious cabling, explosives disguised as maintenance conduit. Each discovery was surgically precise, and each time, Havoc led them there. "It's like he's mapping a language none of us can read," Vasquez said during a late-night debrief. "He's not reading," Reeves corrected. "He's remembering." By week's end, they'd intercepted 5 devices across 4 cities, all tied to Romero's logistics operations, all aimed at crippling transport networks to disrupt federal movement. But the chain had been broken, and now it was turning back on itself. In a quiet conference room in New York, jurors signed indictment papers. One by one, they authorized charges against senior Romero leadership: racketeering, murder, narcotics, corruption, terrorism. The testimony had landed. The witness had survived. But none of it would have happened if not for a working dog with an unnatural gift and a handler who knew how to listen. The days that followed saw sweeping arrests across multiple states. Safe houses, financial fronts, and communications hubs tied to Romero's empire were raided. Tactical units executed coordinated takedowns that had been in planning for years, accelerated now by Dr. Vega's testimony. In Baton Rouge, a warehouse operating as a front for weapons distribution fell. In Phoenix, a shell company laundering funds through crypto mining operations was dismantled. Every success was rooted in intelligence gathered not just from documents, but from Havoc's alerts, which pointed agents toward caches and meeting sites with uncanny precision. The Department of Justice quietly briefed the president. What began as a protective custody case had become a federal security revolution. The implications stretched far beyond Vega, or even Romero. It was about trust, in people, in processes, and in something as seemingly simple as a dog's nose. One senior analyst at Homeland Security put it bluntly: "We've spent billions on detection tech, but what saved us here was 4 legs and instinct." At Quantico, new training programs were being fast-tracked. Canine units were no longer auxiliary, they were strategic assets. Havoc's performance had reshaped doctrine. Detection wasn't just binary anymore. It was behavioral, contextual, interpretive. And agencies across the country were taking notice. Reeves, though, kept it simple. He listens, I watch. Together, we find the things no one else sees. On the 6th night after the Nashville operation, they returned briefly to base for rest. Havoc curled into his usual corner, content but alert. Even asleep, his ears twitched. At hallway sounds, Reeves sat nearby, boots off, reflecting in silence. He thought about Vega, about the jurors in New York, about every truck, tunnel, and toolbox Havoc had led them to, about the terror they had stopped, and the quiet they had returned to people's lives. And he knew it wasn't over. But for tonight, the chain had been broken, and Havoc slept. At dawn, Manhattan felt like a different city. The streets gleamed under orange light, still quiet, still hopeful. But inside the federal courthouse, a fortress had awakened. Every corner, every corridor, every vent and shadow had been evaluated, swept, reinforced. The building stood not just as a seat of justice, but now as a target, and at the heart of its defenses, Reeves and Havoc. Dr. Vega's testimony had already shaken the foundations of the Romero cartel. Day 1 was financial, architecture. Day 2 would be about names, crimes, violence, the brutal machinery behind the money. Every hour she spoke, she built a bridge from blood to bank, from murder to spreadsheet, and the cartel knew it. The night before, intelligence analysts intercepted communications indicating a shift in tactics. Gone were the intricate infiltration schemes. What remained was raw desperation, a last attempt, a final strike. Havoc stirred just before sunrise, his body taut, alert. Reeves, already in gear, knelt and clipped on the harness. "You ready, partner?" A brief look from Havoc, steady, focused. It was enough. They deployed early, assigned to a newly identified vulnerability, a service corridor near the courthouse's mechanical systems. As other teams cycled through perimeter positions and interior checkpoints, Reeves and Havoc worked the route in silence. At 8:43 a.m., Havoc's posture shifted. Subtle, to most, invisible, but to Reeves, undeniable. "Possible interest," he radioed. That cheapie approached a maintenance cart left just outside a utility closet. It looked routine. Cleaning supplies, a mop, a folded towel. Havoc sat, directly in front of the lower storage compartment. "Confirmed alert," Reeves announced. "Requesting EOD to Corridor Delta 3. The building never stopped moving, but now it did so with tension. While the courtroom remained undisturbed, the response unfolded like choreography. Technicians, analysts, remote scanning, lockdown. Inside, the cart, a 20-pound improvised explosive device, remote-activated, lethal radius of 40 feet, concealed within janitorial equipment that had passed initial clearance. Had it gone undetected, it would have detonated during a routine corridor sweep, killing marshals, prosecutors, or Dr. Vega herself. But it didn't, because of Havoc. As the EOD team worked to neutralize the device, analysts scrambled to trace how it entered the facility. The forged credentials, the timing, the placement, it all suggested a Romero specialist with direct action experience. Surveillance footage narrowed to a single entry timestamp. 5:12 a.m. Facial recognition hit. A known associate of Juan Delgado, the operative who planted the Nashville device. This was no coincidence. This was part of an evolving strategy. Meanwhile, Dr. Vega remained in testimony, unaware of the proximity of the attempt on her life. Her voice carried through sealed audio channels, detailing laundering processes through overseas shell accounts, linking cartel funds to political donations, and construction bids. In another wing, Reeves gave Havoc water, checked his pause. The dog remained focused, alert but calm. "You're keeping score today," Reeves whispered. 2 hours later, as the courthouse resumed routine, a second anomaly surfaced. This time it was Havoc who noticed it again. A faint hesitation at the base of an emergency stairwell. No alert yet, but focused attention. Reeves signaled backup. They found a bag tucked behind a fire hose panel, containing surveillance equipment and building schematics. Not explosives, but eyes, watching, logging schedules, patrol rotations. This wasn't one attacker, it was a network. The incident prompted another security recalibration. The courthouse shifted protocols, closing off all non-essential access points and initiating adaptive patrol schedules. Havoc had, once again, forced their hand to move ahead of the threat. By midday, Dr. Vega's testimony had reached the part that no one dared interrupt. The murder orders. She named the men. The dates, the meetings. She connected her brother's death to internal cartel disputes, then traced the fallout across 2 countries. The courtroom was silent. Jurors leaned in. Some took notes. Others stared, wide-eyed. Outside, in a side corridor, Reeves leaned against a wall, Havoc sitting beside him. "That's justice happening in there," Reeves murmured. "And you're guarding its heartbeat." The day ended with no further incidents. The EOD unit cleared the device. Forensics began processing. Facial recognition searches were expanded. The Romero operation had failed again, but it had left clues. and those would be its unraveling. As the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, the courthouse remained sealed, but not shaken. It had taken a hit. It had adapted, and it had endured. And at the center of it, a German shepherd with a gift. That night in the Federal Operations Center, Director Sullivan convened an urgent task force meeting. All federal agencies were now under directive to prioritize courthouses, federal buildings, and potential targets outlined in Vega's deposition. "We are now past the defensive phase," he said. "We take this to them." The task force examined a network map of Romero affiliates, interlinked shells, code names, offshore logistics. At each node there were vulnerabilities, and at each they would send someone. And sometimes they would send havoc. Reeves studied the deployment schedules. He'd never seen so many red circles in so many places. It wasn't just about Vega anymore. It was about every judge, every case, every piece of truth Romero tried to silence with fear. At a debrief later that night, Dr. Vega finally learned about the bomb. She sat for a long time in silence. Then she looked at Reeves. "Was it him?" Reeves nodded. "He saved the day again." Vega knelt. Havoc approached slowly, gently placing his head near her knees. "Thank you," she whispered, tears falling quietly. For a long time, neither of them moved. Chapter 9. Retaliation. The air inside the FBI Joint Operations Command Center was thick with urgency. Maps glowed under touchscreen overlays. Agent names and call signs blinked in color-coded updates. New York had just endured a direct threat to its judicial core and survived. But survival was not enough. Now, the retaliation would begin. Director Sullivan stood at the head of the operations room, his voice clear and cold. "We've confirmed 3 active operational cells, 1 in Phoenix, 1 in Atlanta, 1 in El Paso, each with tactical capabilities. We go after all of them, simultaneously." The message was unmistakable. The Romero cartel had struck at the heart of American justice. Now it was the United States' turn. Special Agent Reeves and Havoc had barely rested, but there was no hesitation. When their assignment came through, El Paso located near the border, El Paso had long been a hub for Romero's trafficking logistics. But intelligence had uncovered something new. A staging facility masquerading as a vehicle maintenance depot. It received parts daily from Mexico, carried across legal channels but laced with illicit materials, and worse, intercepted communication suggested something active was being assembled there. "Full sweep live intel," Reeves was told. "Havoc leads. Your point." They flew overnight under federal airlift. Upon landing, they were met by DHS tactical teams and local FBI units. The target, a warehouse just outside the city, fenced but unassuming. Inside, it held a fleet of trucks and secrets. Havoc's paws hit the tarmac before sunrise. By 6:15 a.m., the team surrounded the compound. A drone buzzed overhead. Reeves secured Havoc's gear, then gave the command. "Seek." They moved as one. Inside, the warehouse echoed with emptiness, but Havoc's head turned sharply to the UO, toward a stack of crates. No visual indicators, no odors detectable by humans. But something in the air changed for him. He paused, then sat. Reeves raised his fist. Positive alert. Left quadrant, red tag crates. Technicians moved in. The crates contained what appeared to be brake fluid containers, but nestled between them, trigger components, high-grade motion-sensitive IED assemblies, destined for insertion into standard fuel systems, designed to detonate at highway speeds, and there were more. Over the next 3 hours, Havoc led the team to 5 distinct caches, each concealed beneath legitimate cargo, each destined for cross-border transport, each lethal. "It's a rolling death system," one analyst muttered. "They wanted to collapse traffic corridors, make every truck a weapon." At 10:47 a.m., the final cache was discovered. And this one was different. Havoc alerted near a seemingly empty loading bay. But beneath a loose panel, Technicians discovered not explosives, but documents, blueprints, names, surveillance photos, and detailed records of every agent who'd worked on Dr. Vega's protection. Reeves stared at the files. "It's a hit list," he said quietly. The retaliation had already begun, from both sides. Back in Washington, the Attorney General convened an emergency national security session. The decision was made. The Romero cartel would now be treated as a hybrid terrorist criminal entity. That classification changed everything. It opened doors to interagency collaboration at a scale never before used on a domestic cartel. New protocols launched. Cyber units targeted their financial wings. Immigration specialists traced family trees and known aliases. ICE and DEA issued joint warrants. But it was the K-9 teams that kept finding the threats before they detonated. In Phoenix, a warehouse was cleared without incident until a K-9 alerted on a ceiling panel. Inside, a surveillance nest. Live. Feeds from multiple government buildings. In Atlanta, a courier service hub yielded nothing for hours. Then a dog refused to move past a rolling bin. Underneath the false bottom, chemicals capable of forming nerve agents. Each time, a dog led them there. And each time, humans followed. The media, still unaware of the full scope, speculated about coordinated raids. But the story was tightly held. The truth about Vega, the bombs, the cartel's network, was being protected as fiercely as the witness herself. By week's end, 37 operatives had been arrested. 9 cells had been identified. 4 plots had been prevented. And Havoc, he had been on 5 flights, 3 raids, and a dozen sweeps. He'd detected 9 distinct threat sources, and he wasn't finished. Reeves met with Commander Ellis via encrypted video. "He's holding up, sir, still locked in, but he needs recovery time soon." Ellis nodded. "He'll get it after one more assignment." Reeves didn't flinch. "Where?" "Miami. Port Authority. We've got a shipment flagged. We want your team on site for verification. Quiet sweep, no alarms." "Understood." The next morning, they landed in Florida under cover IDs. The port was busy, chaotic, normal. No signs of trouble. But that was the danger. Havoc worked lane by lane, container by container. He moved efficiently, his senses stretched. To everyone else, it was just another customs check. Then at Bay 17, he stopped. Crate 482A, marked for export. Contents, electronics. Havoc sat. Reeves approached, signaled EOD inside. They found lithium batteries, but embedded inside 2 of them, remote. Receivers and plastic explosives, enough to cripple a ship's power grid. A tactical threat disguised as trade. Another attempt, another failure. Another win for Havoc. By the time they returned to DC, the K-9 units had become legendary within. The task force, not because of glamour, but because of consistency, accuracy, instinct. And one of them, a German shepherd named Havoc, had become a symbol. The message to the Romero organization was now loud and clear. You can hide your weapons. You can change your tactics. But as long as these dogs walk the perimeter, your plans will fail. As they debriefed back at base, Reeves removed Havoc's harness. "You earned this one, buddy." The dog leaned into him, not tired but content. Reeves looked up at the team. "We've been reactive long enough. Let's finish this." The courthouse was quiet now. Not silent, never that, but settled. After weeks of tension, pursuit, and imminent danger, the grand jury had returned its verdicts. Indictments filed, charges named, warrants issued. And for the first time in over a decade, the Romero cartel's leadership structure stood fractured. It was early evening when Dr. Vega emerged from the secured chambers, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but clear with resolve. 2 deputy marshals flanked her as they guided her toward the secure transport, the final leg of a journey that had stretched from fear into testimony. She paused briefly in the corridor, her gaze falling on a familiar silhouette. Havoc, the German. Shepard sat upright, poised, focused, but relaxed now that the final objective had been met. Reeves stood beside him, arms crossed, watching her approach. "Special Agent Reeves," she said, her voice soft. "Dr. Vega," he replied with a small nod. She crouched slightly to face Havoc, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "I never spoke to your partner here properly." "He knows," Reeves said, "but I think he'd appreciate it. You saved my life more than once," she whispered to Havoc, "and not just mine, my brother's memory, my truth, all of it. None of it would have mattered if I hadn't made it here. Thank you." Havoc responded not with a bark or movement, but with a slow, deliberate blink. It was, in its own way, a nod. The transport team arrived. With one final look back, Dr. Vega stepped inside the armored vehicle. The door closed. The vehicle pulled away into the New York dusk. Inside the operations center, the debrief began. Commander Ellis reviewed final clearance logs, procedural outcomes, and agency coordination reports. The operation was officially deemed a success. But everyone knew the story wasn't over. The Romero cartel had lost key leadership, but remnants remained. The logistics arms, the digital infrastructure, the foot soldiers trained to adapt. Still, the blow was historic. Reeves and Havoc were granted a 72-hour recovery window. A small cabin in upstate New York, tucked into a forested perimeter, became their sanctuary. There, under tall pines and gray skies, Reeves removed Havoc's harness and set it gently on a wooden bench. "That's it for now," he said. Havoc didn't run or relax. He stood for a moment, then slowly lay in the soft pine needles, watching, always watching. Reeves lit a fire and leaned back into the worn wood of a rocking chair, letting the silence settle over them. They had both changed. 2 months ago, they had been part of a protective detail. Now they were symbols of a turning tide. Back in Washington, a task force was established permanently, built on lessons learned from the operation. One of its primary mandates: integrate canine detection into all national security responses, no longer as auxiliary units, but as core assets. And the first image used in the orientation materials was a still photo of Havoc during the Nashville operation. Ears forward, nose low, gaze locked. At the cabin, Reeves received a secure call. "Commander Ellis, we've got a lead," Ellis said. "Final target, Juan Delgado, the last operative still in play. We've traced him to a compound outside Monterey. Local authorities will assist, but we want you in Mexico. One last sweep, one last run." Reeves looked toward Havoc, who was already standing, tail straight, ears raised. "He's ready," Reeves said. Ellis's voice dropped slightly. "This could be the most dangerous one yet. The compound's armed, trained. Delgado knows he's the last thread. Then it's time to pull it." A day later, Reeves and Havoc boarded a federal aircraft headed south. Their mission wasn't official, their identities not listed. The operation was built around precision, speed, and discretion. The compound was embedded within a farm complex, cattle on the exterior, military infrastructure beneath. Drones couldn't get a clear visual, but the signal intelligence confirmed Delgado's presence. At 2:17 a.m., the strike began. Teams moved in, disabling surveillance and perimeter defenses. But inside, it was a maze, and that was where Havoc nutty through dust-filled hallways, across reinforced flooring, around false walls. His senses carried the team past what cameras missed, until they reached a rear chamber, sealed. Havoc halted. Sat. Target inside, Reeves confirmed. Flash charges, entry, subdual. And there he was, Juan Delgado, former military engineer, cartel, tactician, architect of the Nashville device. He surrendered, quietly, without resistance. Like he knew it was over. Back on U.S. soil, Delgado's extradition proceeded without incident. His testimony, offered in exchange for protection, unlocked the final pieces of the Romero network. And when it was done, truly done, Reeves and Havoc returned to the cabin. This time, when the harness came off, Havoc didn't watch. He ran, into the trees, through the needles. He came back minutes later with a stick and dropped it at Reeves's feet. A simple request. Play. And Reeves smiled. They had earned it. There's a kind of silence that only comes after survival. Not the stillness of nothing, but the awareness of everything. Of breath, of light, of time moving forward. Dr. Isabella Vega, now under a new identity, lives in a quiet coastal town. Place where the waves don't ask questions, and the wind carries no judgment. Her days are small now, intentional. Gardening, journaling, phone calls under strict encryption to her federal liaison, checking in every Monday morning at 9. But she sleeps, and dreams without fear. The testimony she gave changed everything. The indictments dismantled a criminal empire. The RICO case reshaped how financial crimes were tracked internationally. And though her life as she knew it ended, something new began. Purpose. She now works quietly with a federal outreach program, consulting anonymously on financial intelligence. Her knowledge saved lives. Her courage changed laws. And she never forgot Havoc. Miles away, in a different state, Havoc and Special Agent Reeves have returned to a kind of normal. They are still active, still part of the elite, but the missions are rarer now. Chosen. Selective, because some tools aren't meant for routine. They are meant for the extraordinary. Every once in a while, a call comes in. A request. A detail no sensor can find. A whisper of something off. And Havoc boards the plane again. But in between, there are walks in the woods, fetch by the river, moments. What they did changed how federal agencies viewed canine detection. Entire training programs were rewritten, funding redirected, doctrine updated, and at the heart of it all, an image, a still photo of a German shepherd, alert beneath the fuselage of a silent aircraft. Stories like these often fade from headlines, but they live on in policy, in prevention, in the lives not lost because someone, something noticed what no one else could. And sometimes at night, Reeves stands outside the cabin, looks up at the stars, and remembers every room Havoc ever cleared, every life he ever saved, every second he trusted the silence and found what was hidden. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a cartel or an operation or even justice. It was about one truth. That, the bond between human and dog, when forged through trust and shaped by purpose, can change the course of history. And somewhere, a new handler begins training with a young pup, and the story begins again.